what made it worth it to put myself in the way of rejection. And boy, did I get rejected. When I write about OCD, it is really vulnerable because it's really scary. So OCD is the 7th most debilitating disorder in the world, and it's completely ruled by fear. It's like reptilian brain times a gazillion. I'm sort of the blueprint for most of what I write. And then the wonderful thing about being a fiction writer is you can have sort of a skeleton, but as you're writing, all the connective tissue starts to form and it can really take on a life of its own. Like Sav, I was assaulted as a teenager, and I really feel like my innocence was ripped from me, and I grew up very, very fast. But the beautiful thing, and I think this is imbued into Old Enough, and it's certainly my perspective now, is that I think that we can grow into innocence. I feel so much younger now than I did at 16.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Hayley Jakobson is a writer and playwright living in Brooklyn, New York. Her pronouns are she, her. She's a Gemini. And in her work, she explores queerness, girlhood, brains, and bodies. As a very online bisexual, Hayley reaches an audience of 39,000 readers on her Instagram page. Hayley's debut novel, Old Enough, was named a New York Times Editor's Choice, made the shortlist for Lambda Literary Award for Best Bisexual Fiction, and was described by Vogue as being full of winsome bisexual chaos, which I love and agree with. Hayley, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
One of the things that kind of prompted me to reach out to you was an Instagram post you shared not so long ago, I think in May, about rejection, which is very on brand. So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with rejection? What does it mean to you?
Yeah.
The word rejection.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I went to college for acting and theater. And by the end of college, I felt very overwhelmed by the idea of auditioning for productions and film outside of school. It almost felt like the sensation of like, I forgot that's what I was supposed to do when I got out of here. And I watched all my friends do that, and I just never pursued it. And I think a big part of that was my fear of rejection, and more than that, this sensation of I don't understand why a group of people has to choose me when I can just choose myself. And this became sort of my mantra for like almost a decade of my life, is like, I choose me, I choose myself. And then when it came time to write a book, which is the thing that I cared most about in my life as an artist, I realized that that mantra was not going to work anymore, because to publish a book is to put yourself in a very vulnerable position to be chosen. And I realized that the reason I never pursued acting was because I didn't care, because I didn't love it. I love writing more than anything else. And that was what made it worth it to put myself in the way of rejection. And boy, did I get rejected. I have a wonderful agent, and our relationship started pretty seamlessly. But when we started to send out the manuscript to publishing houses and editors, I got like 40 plus rejections. And it was really tough because I had not opened myself up to rejection, besides with like dating.
Yeah.
Ever. And so, 29 years old or so, 28, I think, I was like, well, I've had a bucket load of therapy up until this point. Either I'm going to do the not skillful thing and be morose over this and just self-flagellate and be a real dick to myself, or I'm going to try to be skillful and approach this in a much more holistic way because I have no choice, because I care so much. I want to do this so badly. So this is sort of a non-negotiable. This is going to be part of the process. So how am I going to look at this in a different way? And that's when I really started to develop a relationship with rejection. And I think the relationship is, if this is the life that I'm going to live, if I'm going to open myself up to rejection over and over again over the course of my life as a writer, then I need to shake hands with it, and I need to ask myself the question over and over again, who am I in the wake of rejection, and how do I show up in a period or a season of rejection? And I think I have a lot of different tools for that now. And it was really worth it. It was so worth it. And I only got one yes, and that really worked out for me.
It was the right yes.
It was.
I mean, I think that fear of rejection is probably the number one thing that holds people who aspire to be writers back. Like there's a lot of grit involved with putting your work out there and getting it rejected.
Yeah.
If you go back to that process and the tools you developed, because you had to completely reframe it, especially kind of what you said earlier about past Hayley being someone who was working for herself and now you needed to be chosen. What were some of those tools you developed to kind of reshape that relationship with rejection?
I think one is that I was not, my career and my passions could not be defined by this singular project. I had to zoom out and be like, wait, aren't I going to do this a million times before I die? Like this is one, it is the first one, so it feels like the big one, but I am going to be at this for a long time, so I better figure this out in some sense now, and look beyond what this project is, because it's not worth it if this ends here. There's going to be so much more. So that was one. I think also just leaning on my community. One of the things that feels really validating for me is asking my people just to say that they feel really bad for me. And it just feels really sweet and kind. Just I think that speaks to a child part of me of just feel really bad for you. I'm really sorry that this is happening. That feels really loving to me. So I think I did a lot of that. And then just reminding myself of all the things that I love besides writing, which are, I don't know, just little things. I think I was decorating my apartment at the time, so that was really great. Love spending time with my friends. I love shopping. I love movies and TV. I had, of course, my Instagram, which has been such an anchor for me for so long. And, ultimately I was waiting, so I had to wait. And then another big part of it is that I have obsessive compulsive disorder. So I do exposure therapy every week with a therapist. And exposure therapy is really tough. It's really, really hard. It's truly you exposing yourself to your biggest fears. And so I never let OCD win. That's a huge value of mine. And OCD is value-based thinking, approach to life. It kind of puts feelings away for a bit. It kind of circumvents this idea of intuition and gut thinking. And so this was just one real life exposure. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I was just like, bring it on, bring it
Yeah.
on. And so that, yeah, it was really, I think those were some of the tools. I probably had more, but those were really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, they're such great tools, and I think you highlighted a lot of things that I often talk about. A big one being community, and I think that the community aspect comes in because, like, evolutionarily, humans are hardwired to fear rejection because if our ancestors were rejected, they'd be like kicked out of the tribe.
Mm.
There's no food, no shelter, like no community. So having that, like, sort of support system of being able to say, hey, like this bad thing happened, and then everyone rallies around you and is like, you're amazing, you're like, your worth is not defined by this, I think kind of reassures that kind of like lizard brain that, oh, I'm
Yeah,
safe, my community's not gonna kick me out, like it's all gonna be okay.
right, right,
So I love
right.
that so much. um so I think let's chat about your book, Old
Sure.
Enough, which was published a year ago. In this time, kind of since the release, you've received over 1,400 ratings on Goodreads, which is like an insane number, like a number that most authors never reach. I don't even know what your book sales are. But my first question is, has your life changed? I'm sure it's changed. And how has your life changed since the book launch?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. That is, I don't check my Goodreads. That's a big, like a big way I support myself is like I don't.
Love that.
Um, so that's nice to hear. Yeah, my life has changed because I just have access to a world that I didn't have access to before. I think I have a reach that I didn't have before because I now exist in sort of this permanent context. Books live on forever, which is a really beautiful thing. And up until then, all of my writing has existed on Instagram, and which is amazing. And I love that so much. But a book is really different, and that's beautiful. I've had a lot of in-person connections, going on 2 book tours and meeting people in real life. And I think more than anything, it's given me a lot of peace because I felt like I was at the threshold of my life for a really long time. I felt like I was sort of sitting on the edge, waiting and waiting and waiting. And now I feel a lot of peace that I'm just living the life that I am meant to live. I feel really
Interesting.
lucky and grateful.
So when you say your life was on a threshold and you're kind of waiting, what do you mean? Like kind of what did that mean for
I
you?
just felt like I was on the precipice of the rest of my life. Like
Mm.
I just, I have this phrase, which I don't even know if it makes sense, but it's just Hayley for Hayley. Like I'm
Mhm.
really, I really am not a person that's meant to work for anyone else. I'm not a person who is a follower. I'm a leader. Sometimes that can be a complex thing to hold and it can feel lonely, but I was just not in the spotlight of my own life, and I wanted to just exist as the entity of me. Um, and I really feel
Yeah.
so deeply that I am living the embodiment of Hayley for Hayley now. And I'm really grateful for the expanse of time in my life that I wasn't doing that, because you've got to go through all of that trial and error to get
Yeah.
to where you want to be. Otherwise, like, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything if you just snap your fingers and you're there. So I'm grateful for all the odd jobs that I did and all the directions that I went that were wrong for me, and all the people that came in and then out of my life and the people that stayed. It really took me, I'd say like it takes 10 years to break into the entertainment industry as an actor. I feel very similar as in my path as a writer. I think it took a solid decade.
I love that so much, especially the fact that you can sit back and be like, that you're recognizing this place you're in right now, and yeah, I don't know. I think that it's very easy for us to succeed or live our wildest dreams and not really notice that is happening, that you're kind of in that space now, and also taking stock of all the things that didn't go right and how that I think yeah, I just think it's sort of related to like reframing rejection and noticing that. I want to know, like, living this life now that you can be Hayley, and you don't have to take on things that are not right for you. Has it shifted in any way your relationship with rejection? And what I mean by that is, I've felt, if I'm very anonymous, that it's kind of easier to be wild and put myself out there, because I'm kind of anonymous. Like, I don't really care what someone who doesn't know me thinks about me. But the minute it's like people who know me, it feels a lot scarier. Like if it's, putting myself out there in front of my clients or something, it's like, oh no, what are they going to think of me? Like, they've already got a perception of me. So I kind of wonder,
Right.
being in the public spotlight, having your book out, having a big platform on Instagram, has that made it harder in some ways to kind of share stuff or do the things you want to do in an unfiltered way?
Mm, I don't think it's made it harder. I think it's made it more of a responsibility. I feel a massive responsibility to educate and advocate and make sure that I'm very aligned with my values now that I have a large audience of people who really listen to me. I do this sort of weekly advice column on my Instagram, and, it's not lost on me that my words are really impacting people in their day to day life. And it's a big responsibility. But I think in terms of my relationship with the rejection now, one of the things that's really different is now I have this close relationship with a publishing team, right? I have an editor, an agent, and I have a marketing team, publicity team. And when I started writing my second book, which I'm working on now, I was so messy in it. Or no, I tried to start it really in a perfect way, because I was like, I'm a published author now. It's time to write my second book. It's time to keep going. And I started writing this book, and I was trying to write it like it was a final draft, which is so
Yeah.
crazy looking back. And I just hated what I was writing, which is crazy for me because I love what I write. I have a really strong sense of confidence. I've really never hated anything I've ever written, and I think that's because I really follow my own artist compass. But of course, now I'm in a different season of my life. I'm on the other side of my big dream, and I have people sort of waiting on me, and I didn't have that before. So I had to trash what I was writing, and I had to really be honest with myself and say, you are not a polished writer. You are a messy writer. That's always how I've been. I need to be totally unzipped as a person to access my artist self. It's a very vulnerable and soft side of me. It's really mushy. I describe it as like being in the mush. And how scary to present the mush to my agent and my editor when our relationship started with a very polished, finished manuscript.
Yeah.
But the thing when as a fiction writer, your first book, you have to have it completed. But if you are, after your first book, you can submit things on what's it's called unpolished. So where you give an outline and you give just like a chunk of pages, but not the full book. And I just really wanted to bring my agent into it, but I was so terrified that she wasn't going to like it and that she wouldn't get it. And oh my goodness, it was just eating me up. I was so, so scared. But I just knew I had to do it because I just really needed her guidance. She's just so incredible. And I didn't want to write this book alone. I just really didn't. And so I was really brave and I sent her the mush and she loved it and my editor loved it. And since this won't come out till September, I can say that I sold my second book.
Amazing.
Thank you. And I sold the mush. I did not sell perfect. It's very mushy right now and I love it. I'm so, so proud of myself. But yeah, the oh my God, I've never been accountable to people this way in my life. And it was so scary. But I have also this sort of mantra that I tell myself, which is because I am a teacher. I teach writing with confidence. That's what my class is called. And I teach to writers who are ready to step into their identity as a writer, but they have a lot of sort of emotional crap holding them back. And they do so many firsts in my class and they're so vulnerable. And I was like, you have to practice what you preach. You cannot sit here and tell your students that they have to take the plunge, that they have to walk their action alongside their fear. You cannot preach this if you are not practicing it. And so I really do think about that as I navigate new firsts in my life, this second book being one of them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that it really, I don't think that I hear people talking about often kind of that other side of the success, which is now feeling like things have to be perfect. And I'm glad you submitted the mush because I imagine that it was a lot more interesting and more new than
it was, yeah.
a very polished, perfect draft.
Totally.
So in your book, there is a line that stuck with me. I think Sav said it, where she said, "And if they knew the whole me, I doubted they would like that person," which I think really relates to what we're talking about now. And I relate to that line because it's something I felt for a very long time. And I also think that it's this, which is what makes vulnerability in our writing so difficult, because there's always that question mark of like, will people like this side of me, this very real, very exposed side of me? And I mean, that's been a journey for you, right? Is learning how to be a vulnerable, and something you teach. Can you share with me kind of what does vulnerable storytelling mean to you? And how have you built a relationship with this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I think being messy is vulnerable for me. I would say that, talking about the subject matter that's in my book or that I share online, like, being a survivor and my sexuality and, various other hardships that I've gone through, that's pretty easy for me to talk about. But I think what's not easy for me is the unpolished narrative when I'm actually going through something where I don't have perspective or reflection on it yet. And that's not really, my Instagram's not really a place for that, but because, I get to choose how I show up there. And I feel comfortable showing up as relatively polished there. Except I think, it is funny because the nature of exposure therapy is that, we're asked in this therapy to hold uncertainty and to hold complexity and sort of ditch black and white thinking. And so when I write about OCD, it is really vulnerable because it's really scary. So OCD is, it's the seventh most debilitating disorder in the world, and it's completely ruled by fear. It's like reptilian brain times a gazillion. It's so impossibly painful. It really is. And so I would say that that's really vulnerable for me, but that's also like a really great exposure. So when I talk about OCD online, I always email my therapist to I want my gold star, because that's really scary. But then I would say, sort of vulnerability offline is kind of what we've been talking about. Like when I go to writing classes and I don't show up as, as a perfect polished author, and when I show up to my team, and also when I let my friends in on what's going on. Something that I often deal with my friends, well, not deal with, but I think I have an invitation often from my friends to be messier than I am. And so I'm really working on that. I'm really trying to work on, calling my friends when I'm in the emotional state. It's not an easy thing for me to do. And so I've asked them to be very patient with me, because I like a clean narrative. I like to call or talk about it after the fact. But there is something really worthwhile of asking for support when you're in it. And it's something that I am striving towards. I think it's going to take me years to get there, and that's okay. They're all very, very patient with me.
Work in progress. Really relate to that. I think, I think it's easier when you can intellectualize what's happening. It's much harder when it's in the throes of it and you
because it's
dysregulated.
Right, it's very childlike. It's very emotions are not very smart. They're just they're very basic, and for some reason we don't. I don't know. It's childlike, right? When we're children, we're our most vulnerable.
I think kind of if I'm having an emotional reaction to something in my relationship, it's incredibly vulnerable because I feel so much safer if there's a distance and I can point to what's happening and say, this is why I did this. And this is but in that moment, I have no idea why I'm getting emotional about something because I haven't had that chance to reflect. So thank you for sharing that. That was really great. Do you know that I give away a copy of every author who comes on this show's book? All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the podcast, review it, send me a screenshot at media@hustlingwriters.com and tell me which book you're entering for. And I might just be mailing you a copy of the book, but also you're helping me grow a show that I am so passionate about, so delusional about. I wanted to be on Times Square. I want to be interviewing the biggest and best authors, and I need all the help I can to get there. Your subscribe means the world. Your review means the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's resume with the episode. Can you share with the audience a little bit about maybe the synopsis of Old Enough for someone who's never picked up the book?
Sure.
What will they expect? What can they find in the book?
Yeah. So Old Enough is a queer coming of age story. It follows Savannah Henry. She's 19. She's going into her sophomore year of college, and she's come out as bisexual. She's found the group of cool queers that she wants to be friends with, and she's sort of settling into a life that she never imagined that she could have. And then all of a sudden she gets a call that her childhood best friend is getting married, and this catapults Sav into reflecting on a part of her past that she hasn't really been able to look at. And I think the book really explores her journey being pulled between the life that she was told that she should live and the life that she wants to live. And it's a book that tackles many themes and subjects: queer found family, sexuality, what it's like to be a survivor in a post Me Too world, friendship breakups, and there's a romance as well, a friends to lovers romance. I always say it's a too much book because I'm a too much girl, and also coming of age is so messy.
So much.
And it's so many things. So yeah, it's just about hurtling towards the person that you're becoming, and how messy that is, and how wonderful it is, and how scary it is.
I love it so much. The so many aspects. We'll get into it later. So many aspects are very relatable. But my question for you is, because I know you've shared some stories on Instagram. How much of the book was you, and how much of it was fiction? Did you use yourself as a vehicle or inspiration to write this book?
Yeah, I always say that I'm sort of the blueprint for most of what I write. And then the wonderful thing about being a fiction writer is you can have sort of a skeleton, but as you're writing, all the connective tissue starts to form, and it can really take on a life of its own. So I think, my voice is always present in my writing, but I really see Sav as a little sister that I'm shepherding through the world. And yeah, I mean, I'm very candid about, being bisexual, being a survivor, having gone through many friendship breakups. So these are all things that I've contended with in my life, and I still contend with. And, I really wanted to write about all of those things. But Sav isn't me. She and I have dealt with a lot of the same things, but she's a little sister. I'm 31, Sav's 19, and a large chunk of the book follows her at 16. So I've lived a lot more life than her and had a lot more therapy than her. And so we're not the same. We can't be the same.
I love I love the description of little sister. It's such a beautiful way to describe your. There's a line in the book where I think it was Vera said it. She said, "I think trauma does that, makes you grow up really fast." And that I just highlighted it as I read it. I think towards the end. Do you agree with Vera's statement? What do you think she meant by that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's something that I live by, because that was my experience. Like Sav, I was assaulted as a teenager, and I really feel like my innocence was ripped from me, and I grew up very, very fast. But the beautiful thing, and I think this is imbued into Old Enough, and it's certainly my perspective now, is that I think that we can grow into innocence. I don't think that our age determines whether or not we get to be wide-eyed in this world and silly and have, a youthful spirit. And that's been so healing for me. I feel so much younger now than I did at 16, when I was grappling with something so unfair and so adult in this very twisted, insidious way. So I absolutely agree with that.
Growing into innocence, I love that. What does that mean to you? How are you growing into innocence?
I think that for so long I believed that my assault was my sort of burden to bear, and that I had no choice but to just be strong and push through and make it make myself a survivor in a way that was like wearing an armor. And that really didn't work for me, because the most vulnerable part of me is my silliness and my humor. And for so long, I just couldn't let people see that, because that's what I lost. That's the first thing that I lost when I was assaulted, and it didn't really come back until much later in my life. The ability to be vulnerable and silly in front of other people. Uh, and I associate that silliness with vulnerability and innocence, like innocence, I think, is an age where, not an age, but it's almost a quality that's defined by not watching yourself. It's just existing. And I find that as the older that I get, the more healing that I've done, it's a lot easier to exist again without watching myself, without policing myself to be a certain way. And because of that, my silliness has really come back, and I associate that so deeply with my innocence.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that your innocence or your silliness, I guess, do you feel like it made you unsafe, like before you started healing, that maybe you needed to hide that away because you need to
Yeah.
guard yourself and protect yourself?
Yeah, I did, because I was really severely bullied after my assault. So I had to just constantly be on guard, and I couldn't be playful anymore. I was just watching everything around me, watching myself. I felt like I had to be and act a certain way.
Mm.
So I had no time to be silly anymore. It just felt really, really far away from me. And yeah, I mean, I was so guarded for so long, so uncomfortable in my body. So yeah, yeah, so hard. And I think that silliness in my mind, it's so wiggly and flexible and soft.
Mm. Mm. And being bullied, I mean, I read about it in the book and I didn't know if it was your story as well, but that's an extreme secondary trauma
Yeah.
following something very traumatic.
Yeah.
Did Yeah, what was your kind of relationship now, like post kind of, it's been like, probably, you said you're 31, so it's been over a decade,
Mm.
and feeling safe feeling safe enough to open up to people, and feeling safe with friends, and yeah, kind of really just opening up again and not being on guard all the time.
I think just time. Time is
Mm.
what got me here. I mean, it's dependent on how you spend that time. I spent that time sort of being a willing participant in my own healing. I didn't want to harden anymore. I wanted to soften, and through a lot of intensive therapy, I was able to get there. And then it also is just finding the right people. Coming out as gay was a huge part of that as well, because that really brought me to my people. I think the queer community are just able to live in nuance and complexity of personhood in a way that so many people aren't, because it's just, we're constantly breaking down societal structures, and we're so curious about a life out of heteronormative chains. And so that really helped me finding the right people. But one of the things that I talk about is, like, I don't inherently trust groups of people. I don't trust
Mm.
communities. I believe that safe spaces have to be built. They're not guaranteed. I also believe that rupture is so important, and repair is even more important. But I don't know, you could call it jaded, but yeah, I mean, I've seen how fast communities can crumble. And I also think that that's why I'm perceived as so confident with what I share, but my story was told for me for such a long time. So the ultimate power and control that I have is to tell my story, to tell it the way that I want to tell it, and tell it as loudly as I can so other people can't speak for me, because that was taken from me. My autonomy of my voice was taken from me. And I think I'll spend the rest of my life reclaiming my voice. And the same, goes for my assault. Choice was taken away from me. So I have an abundance of choice. Choice is my right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what a profound way to put also being a writer is that power of writing your own story
Hmm.
and owning that story. And I think many therapists have studied this. There is something very healing about
Oh, yeah.
rewriting your own
Very.
story.
Yeah.
Is that something you found like in the process of writing Old Enough? Did you find that it was healing writing the book, or perhaps also through writing your Instagram posts?
Yeah. I think it's just so much a part of my, like, tools in my toolbox that
Mm,
people ask me that question all the time. And I think the answer is just yes. I think it's like,
mm,
but it's so continuous. It's just it's not, it's never finished. Like, it's just a continuous healing. I think it's like a really well-oiled part of myself, this way of processing and this way of being. So I guess I'm just always healing. I'm just always healing because I'm always writing. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's like at Columbia for a time there was a major in narrative medicine, which was the study of how you can write trauma out of your body. And it's certainly what I believe, and I think that's also a part of why, like, going back to my relationship with rejection, I think rejection I tie so closely to capitalism, um, and writing is the foundation of my writing is not capitalistic. It's a holy process. It is the closest thing I
Mm,
have to faith. So it supersedes rejection. Like, I can't,
yeah,
writing for me is like breathing. So it's so much bigger than rejection. I mean,
yeah,
it's immeasurably bigger for me. I cannot describe, you know, just the level of importance. It's what I am born to do. I could not live without it. It is my purpose. It's my way of moving through this incredibly complicated world.
mm. Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer? Pre-16, when you were very young, is it something you always knew, or was it there a point where you kind of realized this is what you need to do?
I think that I never ever questioned whether or not I was a writer. No one ever
Mm,
said to me, you need to be XYZ to be a writer. I was
mm,
always a writer. It was just a given.
mm,
The second that I learned to write, I wrote. It was very, very supported in my family. We're no, even if it's not what people do as their careers, everyone in my family is a writer. And
mm.
so it wasn't like there was no decision to be made. I mean, I guess the question is, when did I decide to sort of pursue it as a career? I don't remember ever making an explicit decision. I just remember thinking, well, I can't seem to get myself to do anything else. So
Yeah,
I guess I'll try to, I mean, I try to write a book. I'll try to grow my Instagram. But for me, it's not tied to a decision. It's truly like, it is my identity. And when I met my partner, I was working my money job, I always call, because writers don't really make money from writing. I mean, I make more money from my Instagram than I do from selling my book. I mean, that's not necessarily true, but in the long run, I think it's going to be true. And I call whatever you do for money, that's your money job, unless you love it. And then you can identify as, with whatever it is. But when I met my partner, I had this photography business and I was quite successful with it. And so, when he would introduce me to people, he would say, Hayley does a lot of things, and he would start with she's a photographer. And I remember, I had this conversation. I said, don't ever introduce me as that. I'm a writer. I make money from photography, but just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I identify with it. Like, I know I do a lot of things and I'm good at a lot of things, but when you talk about me as a writer.
Yeah, I love that so much. I run a PR business, that's the bread and butter, but like the core of everything is I'm a writer. Like if anyone asks me what I do, and it's also like I'm like that's the skill that allows me to do what I do in PR. Like if I couldn't
Right.
write, I wouldn't be able to send
Totally.
pitches and land pitches. So actually, I'm very curious to know like your process in writing the book. So you had a lot going on career-wise. You had the photography business. Writing a novel, as you mentioned, is no easy thing to do. You had to write it and get it edited and get it polished before you could find an agent. Was that your process? And how did you write the book? Like, where did you make the time, and what was your relationship to writing before you had a book deal?
So I actually had nothing because I wrote the bulk of Old Enough during the height of the pandemic. So
Oh, okay.
I was not only running my photography business, but I ran a theater company for 5 years. So those were my two things. I mean, the theater company didn't make me any money, but I loved it. It was such a joy in my life. And I'm, such a theater person. But anyway, everything stopped. And then I got diagnosed with OCD because everything stopped and I sort of lost my mind for a bit. And then I got better. And then my mom, who's always my compass, said, you need to get into a writing class because that's what you need to do. She always brings me back to myself when I lose myself. So I signed up for a 12-month writing class, which was a novel generator. And out of all those people in the class, I was one of very few people who actually finished the book. And then I sold it. And then I got an agent really quickly. And then months later, we sold it. So I wrote it pretty much every day for 9 months, and I finished it in 9 months. Then I edited it for like 3 weeks. And then I sent it off into the ether. And then I signed with my agent 2 weeks later. So that was a very lucky process. So I would say that now I'm actually dealing with the reality of the real world. But the thing is about having endless time on your hands, it's actually so hard to get yourself to do anything. I always tell my students that I'm like, you think you want to quit your job, but I promise you don't. And I was so like mentally unwell for the first 6 months that I didn't write anything. So I don't know. I had a really unique process with that, but I still had to be very diligent. I had to create that space, and I don't know. So
because there's no one forcing you to write that book. No one's saying
no, and I had no publishing connections. So I was just betting on myself. I did not have anything set up in place for me. I just had to write the book, and I had many breakdowns while writing the book. Well, not many, but I had probably 3 significant ones of like, what if this is for nothing? And that's rejection in itself. That's like dealing with rejection. And then I just kept going. I don't know. I showed myself a lot of tenacity in that time. I was really worried that I had fried my brain from writing Instagram captions for like a decade of my life. It was really exhausting to write for long stretches of time, but I really built that muscle back up, which I'm very happy about. So it was just a lot of value-based approaches to my work. And I don't know, my process, like everyone always wants to ask about process, but my process is that I write out of linear order. I might write the second to last chapter of a book one day and the first chapter the next. I write in stretches of time or word count, like an hour, tried to hit like between 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words an hour, 2 hours. And besides that, it's really boring. I mean, writing is boring most of the time. I love it so much. I love having written, but during it, it's like, I don't know, it's boring.
Yeah, yeah.
And it can be. It can be. I feel so, I mean, we romanticize it so much, but I don't actually think that's how we get our work done.
No, I don't. I'm sure the process of getting those 3,000 words per every 2 hours or whatever it is not a romantic period. It was
No, no.
really a lot of grit. Um, oh my gosh, my question just popped out of my brain. I was wanting to ask. So, in those moments where you had those kind of breakdowns, or was like, what am I doing all of this for? I'm curious to know kind of how you navigated that because it's a huge project to embark
Yeah,
on.
it is huge. Yeah.
Without a guarantee that it's going to see the light of day. And I think that that's why most writers don't ever finish their books. There's no one saying like, here's the golden finish line and you're going to have a great book deal at the end. You have to kind of overcome those mental blocks of knowing that you don't know if you'll
Yeah.
get the book deal of your dreams. So yeah, kind of how did you navigate those periods?
I think it's a mix of two things. Like I had just lost my mind and I just had sort of like certifiably insane for a while, and that sucked, and that was really demoralizing and scary. So it was part of it was like it was about creating a safe container for myself, and it was like giving myself a gift of and reminding myself of my worth and my capabilities. So that was part of it. I mean, I will say like it was a cozy time in my life, writing Old Enough. I look back at it very fondly, and I think when I would get in those tunnels of self-doubt, um it was usually because I was sort of not connected to my values of like why writing is important to me, and again that like sort of how holy it is for me. I was just maybe succumbing to sort of capitalism and the pursuit of fastness. And publishing is a slow industry, so that's been a great exercise in patience. But I think the way I always got myself back on track was, yeah, just like grounding myself in my values. I don't like to talk about like woo woo stuff, but I do believe sort of in the scientific power of manifestation. So I'm just going to say that it's a much more of a scientific way of thinking about it than it is like spiritual. I do think that writing down what your goals are and um, just like really rewires your brain. So I probably did manifesting like at least like 3 days a week where I would just sort of write down. I would write down always the vision for the team of people that I would find. Not about money, not about book sales, a little bit about what I would wear on my book tour, but mostly who would show up and be in my corner. I wrote down what kind of agent I'd like to have, someone fiery, someone hungry, someone who just understands me, understands the book, what kind of editor I'd like to have, what kind of team I'd like to have. It's really all that I pictured because like community is so deeply important, and I wanted help so badly. I was just ready to get help. And I gotta say, I mean, I got exactly what I manifested. I have the most brilliant team of people. I'm so lucky. I'm so, so lucky. And I think it's just because I focused on a true value instead of something like, I mean, not that money's not a value. It certainly is. It's just, it has to be attached to something greater. And I think for me, having the right team was attached to this sort of greater need of support and help. I was just very tired of doing things by myself.
I love this so much because I think that, when you think of a book writing process, obviously I can't speak for anyone listening, but for myself, like I've never gone into the like nitty gritties of like who would be an agent and who would be the editors and stuff. It's more kind of like what does this finished product look like? And I think that really manifesting, and I love, by the way, I love the term scientific manifestation, because like I know like there is science there, that
Yeah, there
if you
is.
yeah, if you're open to something, you're also going to be more receptive to notice opportunities and
Exactly.
kind of pursue
Exactly.
them. Yeah, so kind of like really, I think my takeaway is like what kind of get into the sort of details of the thing that you're manifesting, and identify. Like I love the idea of kind of
Yeah.
identifying who you would want as an agent and what kind of person that is that would support your book writing process.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few things that I actually haven't touched on, which is capitalism and your values. So I think, and I wanted to ask you about this earlier. Earlier, you spoke about well, not book, sorry, writing, just writing in general as being kind of the closest thing you have to faith,
Mm,
and um, that there's also then this balance of capitalism, and capitalism, monetizing something that is kind of holy to you.
right.
Um, and now your writing is the product, and the product is the book, and you have to go and do very capitalist things like promote the book and go on book tours and stuff. So, what has your relationship been like with kind of navigating that balance between capitalism and something that's very sacred to you? And how have you used your values to navigate this?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't see the marketing or
Mm.
the book tour as something that I have to do, because I am someone that like it's almost impossible for me to do things that I don't want to do. I like
Yeah.
I just like I'm such a bad student. I'm such a rebel. Like I was such a bad girl growing up. So I love the hustle. I love marketing. I love planning. I just like I really love it. And I don't think that I like I just was always going to do publishing my way, and I think that's why I got a really good book deal, was just because they really trusted me. Um and I know that my team's really happy, but the first thing that I say to my students is like, I really just think that you'll burn out if you waste your creative energy on things that you just like hate and drain you. I feel like there's always a really creative approach to anything that you don't want to do. I mean, I think that is a privileged thing to say, and so I'll be the first to admit that. But I guess I've just seen a lot of people find really creative ways to make their life work. So I think the only time that the capitalistic nature of it all is difficult is like when I'm in the process of writing. It's very hard to
Mm.
write something new and also like be marketing myself. Like that's why I'm like I'm tired now after my book tour, and I'm ready to like go into my hibernation. And I'm so happy that I feel that way, because for so long I was like, I feel like I'm just a marketing machine. That's like really all the energy that I have. I want to go towards that. And oh gosh, what if I never get into a creative season of starting something new? But inevitably it's come. And I think that just comes from like having some trust, occasional freakouts. I think like faith is losing faith. Like it's
Mm.
losing it, finding it again, losing it, finding it again. I just think it's like, I don't know, it's an ever evolving thing. But I don't know. I do think that everybody has a capacity to make capitalism work for them. But I'm not one to claim or know what that's going to be for you.
Yeah. I love so many things that you said, but kind of what really stuck out was Oh my gosh, my brain's just blanked. So much that's stuck out
okay.
there.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I think this idea of understanding that there's seasons, because I think in the
Totally.
creative process, you know, especially if the capitalist system says if you want to write a book, you need to be marketing yourself and you need to be creating at the same time, and it's hard. Like I don't think I've spoken to anyone who has said that it's easy to be creating and marketing yourself, and it's okay for some things to feel really hard or feel like some things need to go in the back burner. So I really love
Yeah.
that you touched on that. My final question, and I just want to say thank you so much for being such a great guest. It was
Thank
really
you.
great chatting to you. My final question is actually for this podcast. So I have a rejection goal for this podcast. I want to get 100 rejections from very well-known authors. So far, I've gotten
Mm-hmm.
rejections from Chimamanda Adichie, Roxane Gay, a couple of other names that I'm blanking on now. Do you have any suggestions on who I should pitch next, to add to my potentially add to the guest list, but if not, at least add to my rejection list?
Yeah. Oh my God, I have so many people. Okay, ready? Um,
Yes.
um, Mary H.K. Choi, Sarah Thankum Matthews, Shelley J. Shore, Casey McQuiston, Amanda Montell would be great for this. Allegra Cassens. I mean, I could just name people forever, but those are those
I'm
are
going to
people.
listen back and write all the names down and reach out to them. So thank you
Yeah,
so much, Hayley.
so
Um,
welcome.
Hayley's book, Old Enough, is on sale on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles if you're in the US, probably in other places too. I will also be giving away a copy to a listener who rates and reviews the show. You just need to send screenshots to media@hustlingwriters.com. There's also instructions in the show notes. Thank you so much, Hayley. This was fantastic. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And a reminder to all readers to shop from your local indie bookstore because that's actually what helps authors the most. But of course, accessibility is so important. So if you got to go with the big guys, totally understand.
Yeah, if you are in the US, certainly go to your local indie bookstore. Tell me about other countries, people elsewhere. Are there books?
Yeah, I do think for other countries it is easier to shop like Barnes and Noble and probably Amazon. I forgot about that this audience might be different.
There's a
Um,
big US audience.
yeah. And then yeah, if you go to my website, I have a link for different places and Canadian viewers. And then also I really recommend my audiobook of Old Enough. My one of my best friends, Jenna, who is a fabulous actor, narrated it. It's really, really special. And I think it's just a true performance, and sort of different than audiobooks you've listened before. And you can buy that on just sort of anywhere you get your audiobooks.
I did a mix of listening and reading. Like sometimes I listened and then like the Kindle kind of like matches with where the audiobook is, and I did really enjoy her narration. So I can second
Awesome.
that.
Yay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hayley. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper. Thank you for listening to today's episode of My Rejection Story. I hope this conversation was as fun as I had recording it. I enjoy every episode. So just a reminder that you can win a copy of a book every single week. I do a giveaway of the author I interviewed. So if you love this conversation and you really want to grab your get your hands on a copy of the book, please enter the giveaway. All you have to do is subscribe and review the podcast and email me at media@hustlingwriters.com. And if you've already done it, you can do it from another app. And if you've already done it on all your apps, you could also just borrow a friend's phone, do it from a friend's phone, and let me know, like on the screenshots, that you did it on a friend's phone, because the more reviews and subscribes, the more likely I am to grow the show and make this podcast even bigger and better than it is, perhaps even get some funding, be able to invest money back in the show, and really just deliver on my promise to you, which is to make this as good as I can. So I just want to say a huge thank you quickly to my team, Christina Schild, Samantha Dubé, and Chechofacho Ndabane. This show would not be here if it wasn't for them and their tireless work and belief in this mission. And then a huge thank you to the distribution partners. So there are some amazing people out here trying to get the word out to their networks, and also people that I think you will find extremely helpful, because if you want to write a book and get a book out there, these are experts in book writing and book publishing. So a couple of writing coaches who are highly recommended in my field: Emily Tameo Maher, Lindy Feel, Tracy Stewart, and Javasia Harris Bowler are all highly recommended writing coaches. And I know so many people who have used writing coach, and it's really helped them get the word out there and get the book out there and not just stay stuck in that draft phase. So their details are all in the show notes. And then also Nick Courtwright is the CEO of a hybrid publishing house, which is an interesting way of publishing a book, and it's highly recommended. Many of my clients have gone through it with great success. You can find out all of Nick's details in the show notes as well. And if you have any questions about them or need their contact details because for some reason you can't find them, pop me an email. And thank you again for listening to the show. I'll see you next week for another conversation. And yeah, have a great Wednesday.